Hey chaps, alright, I'm going to share 6 games today. One of them was shared by a chess.com friend, and I think the other 5 I played in the wee small hours of last night. And this is, each of these games I think can teach us a lesson, and one of the key lessons that you've got to remember all the time is that anyone can blunder at any time, right? You've got to have your spider senses. In fact, right now I'm gonna update my my checklist. Did my opponent just do something dumb? Right? Okay. Now, so back to the games. Hang in there and tune in your senses, and do not forget that new step. Did my opponent just do something fucking stupid, right? Because we all do. And with my apologies, I have to start with this game. Your king is hanging, mate. I'm sorry. I know you shared it on the group, but it's too instructive not to share with all 5,000 of you, 5,000 plus now. Okay, so we're going to go through this game. I mean, I know this is really painful, but you know, pain is how we learn, right? E4, E5. Sorry, D4, D5. We're going accelerated London system. Knight comes out. E3 protects the pawn. Knight comes out. Bishop. All normal. Now this is a poor move from White. Now White here is 200 points higher rated. It must be said. Why put your bishop there and invite C3? Because you've just lost the tempo. Yeah. Now, White has 3 pawns developed and 3 pieces. Black has 3 pawns, 3 pieces developed and only 2 pawns, and it's White to play. Right. So White now goes in with the knight to E5. Good place, and recapture here with a pawn. Interesting move. Right. So this semi-opens the D file, doubles up on the E file. But this knight has to move now, right? If White had recaptured with the bishop, the knight would have had options. Could have just sat there and say, okay, take it. I'll develop my queen, right? Now the knight has to move. So that's an interesting move choice. And now I would be tempted. I mean, I know we've got some dark squared pawns, so that makes the light squared bishop more mobile. But if take the knight, pawn takes queen, king takes. Maybe castles, get a rook onto that file would be a thought. White decides to castle straight away. Knight moves to here, attacking the bishop, which is defended by the queen. White has an issue that he needs to develop his knight at some point, and he can't put it straight there, because that would block the queen's defense of the bishop and drop the bishop, right? So develops the bishop, but again this invites c6, right? Surely, and that's better for the queen, and better for the bishop. So poor move again there, but you know, with sub 1000 here, this is not, this is polish at the sub 1000 level. What we're looking at is not doing things completely and utterly stupid. Okay, now b5. So this is putting pay to any intentions of castling that way. Black's going to have to castle that way. Bishop retreats to c2. So far, all is equal. Pushes another pawn. I'd have probably castled at this point in time. Also need to think about improving this bishop, and this bishop a6 looks like the only place for that bishop to go. Otherwise it's trapped behind its own light squared pawns, yeah? So was there a point to this move? Pawn takes, bishop takes. Nothing much changes, life goes on as much as it ever did. Okay, and bishop takes. Now we've got a3, we can kick the bishop, yeah. And the bishop goes back, and now b4. Boom. Bada boom. Right? You can lose material. Bye-bye, bishop. So that was a completely pointless kind of sequence from Black that Black completely initiated and walked straight into. Right? Look at this. I'm going to push my pawn. And the pattern to spot is, you've got 2 pieces, right? They're 2 squares apart, and there is a pawn that could fork them, right? So bang, takes, there. Now, would I expect somebody sub 1000 to spot that sequence? No. But it was there. And it was completely pointless. There's no idea behind this sequence at all. Okay, knight now retreats. Now here, what you have to do is you have to look at the checklist and say, okay, what just changed on the board, right? Why did my opponent make that move? Well, he's getting out of an attack, but he's also counter-attacking the pawn, right? So here, there's an argument to say queen d2, something like that. Let's defend the pawn. There's no reason to give up material, right? White plays knight c3 and drops a pawn. Now bishop a4, and we've pinned this guy. It is defended by the knight. Bishop here attacks the rook. And now a nice move from white. Very, very nice move. And you would think that a player that can spot this move has suddenly transformed in a couple of moves' time. Because, I mean, this is great, right? So we grab a pawn with check. Something must be done, right? So knight takes bishop is the obvious move. Otherwise, it's king has to move or queen blocks, and that's not going to happen. So knight takes, and now rook takes bishop. We've won another pawn. Okay. So now knight attacks rook. Queen defends rook with check. That is a really nice move. Your king is hanging, is capable of finding some really, really interesting moves. Right, now queen blocks, I would trade queens. Oh no, hanging knight, beauty, look at that. It's a fork. Right, now white is up basically 2 minor pieces for a pawn. And look at the safety of that king, right? This is an unlosable position. But wait. Black now decides to castle his king into fresh air. Now, what would you do here? As white, you've got an overwhelming advantage. You've got 2 minor pieces that your opponent doesn't have. You probably want to you probably want to eliminate this pawn here at some point, because that's really the only chance that black's got to win. White now develops the rook to c1. Now, safer things to do would be, for example, check, right? It's either queen blocks, and that's not going to happen. Queen blocks, you trade off queens, all right, and then you win this pawn. If the king moves, you can't capture there. King moves to here, check again, and that forks queen and king. Defended by the knight, you force an exchange, right? Simplify, simplify, simplify. You don't want to complicate. Okay, now, rook c1. Okay, this is understandable. We are lining up a rook against the enemy king, getting ready for a discovered check. Queen moves to here. I would trade queens. But instead, we have knight b5 discovered check. Okay, fair enough. Now, this queen is attacking this rook here, right? And stuff has just got somewhat complicated, okay? So, we have queen there, defends the rook, defends the knight. Rook c8, queen back to here. That drops the rook. But worse than that, rook takes c1. There's only one legal move. Queen blocks, checkmate, okay? Now, that's a real stinger. I know that, but here's the point, right? At this point, the computer will say white is plus 15 or something like that, right? So you need to know what is the right thing to do, okay? So when your king is hanging shared this on the Chess Bootcamp Club, I made the comment, you were so busy figuring out the right way to win, you forgot not to lose. And that is what I think is happening here. And that's why we have the first rule of Chess Club. Is my king safe? Am I absolutely sure? If my opponent had to find a way to win, what would it be? Now, this king here is snug as a bug in a rug. This rook isn't even needed, right? White has a material majority on the board without this rook. In fact, material is technically equal, and he's got a totally exposed king. Yeah. So what you do here is you simplify. Queen here, get the knight in, maybe attack the rook with a bishop, something like that. This rook has to move this way now, yeah, away from the action. Lots of ideas. And a very painful lesson. Okay, well, let's move on. Okay, so bearing in mind, the theme is that anybody can make a mistake, anybody can blunder at any time. And when you are in front, as we just saw in the previous game, it's even easier. Okay, we have a Scandinavian. I've got the black pieces, my opponent's rated 1500. Okay, this is the line I always like to see, right? White is trying to hang on to this pawn. Not a good idea. The best move here is d4. Okay, we play e6. They always take, you always take that with the bishop, right? So we've given up a pawn, and we have a 2-0 advantage in terms of development. But it gets worse than that, because we have knight out here. I now decide to develop my bishop, because the key move here is queen e7, preparing for a discovered check. When you move the bishop, maybe capture the pawn, right? But I'm just trying to play a little bit of sleight of hand. If I play queen e7, I'm blocking in my bishop anyway. So I just thought I'd put some pressure on this knight. Okay. Maybe suggest that I'm planning to castle long and not planning to inflict unpleasantness on my opponent. So now, queen e7, right? Other moves are, you're going to knight c6 and then castle long, putting your rook on the semi-open d file. This is what I love about this Icelandic gambit. Yeah? Okay, and now, white, who is, by the way, rated 1500, okay? Now, if you're one of those players who goes, how do you get 1500s playing so badly against you? It's not that. Everybody plays badly. And if the more solid you play, the more likely your opponents are to make mistakes. The more coordinated your pieces are, right? The more of a plan you've got, in a way, the better you know your opening ideas, the more likely you are for your opponents to make mistakes. But everybody makes mistakes. The key thing is, did my opponent just do something dumb? Well, in this case, no, right? But now I can grab the pawn. This is a free pawn because it comes with this discovered check like the queen, right? What my opponent didn't ask here is, why did my opponent make that move? Ah, the queen is in line with my king. Ah, there's only a bishop in the way. If the bishop moves, it's check. That means that the bishop gets a free move. Okay? Doesn't matter about this. I mean, maybe he saw that, I don't know. But it's still a free move. Yeah? So a better move could have been, for example, bishop blocks, but then still, because the pawn isn't defended, I can take it anyway. And then I've got a bishop and a queen looking at that bishop here. Okay, so I get the bishop. He blocks. And now I have a think, and I decide. So I can attack his bishop here. My bishop itself is attacked. However, I think increasing danger levels, capture the knight. Capturing the knight attacks the rook. Okay. Plus I've still got two pieces looking at this. So is my opponent going to be forced to capture there? Maybe bring the knight out, maybe bring the rook across. Nice, kind of feel like I'm on the front foot here. My opponent here, with 7 minutes 44 on the clock, thinks for 14 seconds and then captures that bishop. He's got two bishops he could take, right? So he's thinking only about himself. He's thinking, well, they're both bishops, they're both worth 3. I need to recapture a bishop. And I want to recapture that one to remove the pressure on this, but then drops his rook and then resigns. 1500 level players will resign a game after 2 minutes of a 10-minute game when they blunder. Simple. Next game. Right, this is actually a longer one. This is interesting. So we have a Sicilian. My opponent, again, is rated, 1566 or 1570 here. I don't know if it shows their rating at the end of the game or before the game, but anyway. So, 10-minute rapid, okay? I play open Sicilian. We have d6, and this is now the delayed Alapin. I was chatting to Christina when we were commentating on the Fight Night, Chess Bootcamp Fight Night the other day, and she's saying she's playing the Alapin. So the idea of the Alapin is you want to play d4, and c3 is, is supporting d4. And you see this a lot, you know, this c3 move, right? c3 is a great move. It also allows your queen out into the board. Queen now has lots of good squares, all looking at the action area down there, right? It's all good. What it does do is it takes out the development square, natural development square from that knight. So we have knight c6, we have the bishop out, maybe preparing to castle, also eyeing up the tender f7 spot. Knight comes out, and d3. Obviously the knight is attacking this pawn which is undefended at this point in the game. And I think this is maybe an inaccuracy. I'm not sure about this move. Because like we say, the whole idea of playing c3 is to play c4. Sorry, d4, defended by that. And d3 feels somehow slow. Having said that, I don't know if there's a better way to defend. I mean, bishop here kind of defends the pawn. Could have knight takes, pawn takes with tempo. I don't know. Be interesting to analyse that one. And then we have e5. So trying to block up the centre. I castle, bishop out, bishop out. Bishop out. And I decide not to trade. I think if he wants to trade, that's fine. I'm going to capture towards the centre. We've got a defensive tenacious V here. So I would love to have an extra pawn in the middle here so I can, you know, start to bust my way through. It feels like it's all going to get real in this bit of the board at some point. Okay, castles, knight out. Now I've just about completed development, and black here breaks in the middle. Takes with knight, takes with the bishop, takes with the queen. Right, I'm figuring my bishop didn't have a huge future there. Knight comes here to just improve its position, creep up the board. Pawn out now. This is quite a committal move from white. White's on 8.5 minutes, I'm on 6:44. Watch the clock on this. The clock plays a big role. Okay, so I move my knight around, maybe eyeing up his bishop, maybe eyeing up this corner at some point. And he pushes again, so he's broken my bishop's defense of my knight. That's okay, because I can trade my way out of it, okay? So I capture the bishop attacking the rook. So if pawn takes now, I get a rook. So I win the exchange. So queen has to take there. And now I retreat my bishop. Okay, so now we've got a 3 and a 4 in pawns. We've got a 3 and a 4 in pawns as well, but his is staggered. Okay. We both have a dark square bishop, we both have a knight, so it's very, very even. Rook comes across to the semi-open file. Rook comes across to the semi-open file. So now my threat is actually this. Did I miss that? So I can capture that pawn. This pawn's pinned against the queen, eh? So I don't know why I missed that one. I could have just grabbed that pawn for free. Okay, but I come here because I guess my worry is he's going to push here and attack my knight with a discovery against this and a fork against the rooks. Okay, 4 minutes 30 on the clock. I haven't got time to find, you know, to calculate everything because I'm not that quick. Okay, queen e2, doubling up my queen with the rook, attacks the knight, knight retreats, attacks again, pawn takes, queen takes. I've won myself a pawn, but I have exposed my king. Now both kings can see each other. Danger time. And now I'm down to 2 minutes 46. I pin the bishop. So now h4 potentially could win the bishop. He really has to get his king out the way or block with the queen. He blocks with the queen. Knight comes in attacking the bishop. Bishop moves. We trade queens. And now we've got a situation where my opponent has a staggered 3. I have a solid 4. He has this 2 and so do I, you know. So we've both got 2 singletons on the king side. I have a slight advantage on the queen side. Centralize the rook. Pawn comes up. Trade. Okay. Solid. And now my opponent has 4 isolated pawns. Trade. Knight in. Big question now. Do I trade off the bishop? I'm down to less than 2 minutes. I bring my knight back. I think this was a poor move actually. Bring my knight back, trying to protect my king, but quite honestly, there's only a rook that could really check my king down this, semi-open file here. So I think that was actually an error. I think I'd have been better off maybe, I don't know, playing my bishop here with 2 attackers on this pawn, possibly. But I bring my knight back, and then I think at some point I put my knight back on e4. Yeah, he attacks my knight, I defend with a rook. Okay, now I'm down to just over a minute. Okay, now he's traded off his bishop for my knight. Now it's a case of improving the kings. We want to bring the kings up the board. Pushes, and this e-pawn becomes dangerous now, right? Maybe what I should have done is come over to here, but then actually that forks both pieces, so that's not good. So I retire, so I'm trying to keep my bishop and my rook on different coloured squares to avoid knight forks. Comes in, and now okay, so this is I didn't calculate this, I haven't got time to calculate, I've got 47 seconds, right? So I'm figuring this pawn was the defender of the knight, yeah? So I can take, right? And then somehow get my king over here, but bad decision because he doesn't recapture straight away. He pushes his pawn. Much better move, okay? I take the knight. Queen here. Now my opponent has 1 minute 52 and he's got a queen for a bishop and a couple of pawns. Okay, totally winning position, and he's got there's a hanging bishop there. Okay, I throw in a check, throw in another check, come back, defend the bishop against the rook. Right, he's got 1 minute 30. I'm down to 27 seconds. I'll just play through some moves. Right, trades off. Now he's a queen for a rook. Comes in. Right, now my goal here is to try and gain time by getting my king at, I definitely have to avoid forks by the queen, right? So I want to hide like a little fish in a coral reef, right? Just dodging around my pawns to prevent this queen from being able to, fork my rook. So I grab this pawn, check here, check there, boom, right? He's got 51 seconds on the clock, I'm down to 20. All he has to do is not blunder his queen, okay? You've got 51 seconds. People play 60-second chess, right? This is inexcusable. And again, totally one position, totally up on the clock. He's got an extra 30 seconds, right? All he needs to do is take 5 seconds over these moves, right? So the rook is defending this. What he has to do is he has to get onto this diagonal somehow, ideally with check, right? So, I don't know, something like that would be better, Or just keep checking me, right? Just making sure you don't blunder your queen until my clock runs down, right? Because I have to think. He loses his queen, takes. Okay, now who's winning? But I'm down to 10.5 seconds, okay? And this is literally how fast the game goes from this point. Right, I've done all of that in 2 seconds flat. Okay, boom, boom, bang, game over. Okay, so hang in there. Your opponent could blunder. Right, next one. This one is a bit shorter. This is 20 moves. Okay, we have a French. Knight f3. So again, I'm playing this idea of this kind of wing gambit thing, but now we transpose into a Sicilian French variation. So that's a Sicilian with e6 played. Okay, so I go into the Alapin. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to respond to the Sicilian, still not sure. a6, slowish. And so now d4, and again, this is the whole point of playing c3. I want to swap off in the middle, I want to gain the center. Swappy, swappy. d5 now, and I think in general, unless there's a really good way to recapture on here, I like this move when the knight hasn't developed because it takes away that square, right? And if the knight ever comes here, you've got options of bishop takes, right? G takes, and you've buggered up his pawn structure, and he's not going to castle there in a hurry. So, bishop comes out, bishop comes out. f5. Again, we see this f-pawn break. Now, do we capture en passant? Big question. So I need to think about my opponent's castling prospects. Okay, if I remove this pawn, that pawn's gone. He can recapture with the bishop, he can recapture with the knight, he can even recapture with the g-pawn. But whichever way it happens, if I castle here, I'm going to have my rook defending Freddy up there. Should be good. So I take en passant. He recaptures with the knight in this case, and I castle, and he castles. Okay, so you might argue actually this is kind of equal. You know, his rook's on a semi-open file. It doesn't have one of his own pawns in front of it. But let's see what happens. We have queen c2, so fairly obvious here. I'm looking at taking out this pawn if I can remove that knight. And knights are eminently removable. So bishop g5 attacks the knight. Pawn attacks the bishop. Bishop now retreats, saying, go on then. How serious are you, about removing this bishop? I'm going to maintain my attack on that knight. Are you going to play g5? Hell no, right? Knight comes into e4. I now take out his bishop, because I can now win a pawn here, right? Queen takes, take the knight, bang, and has to be noted at this point in time what just changed on the board. Now, 10-minute game, my opponent's on 9 minutes 23. There are always going to be people who play rapid like blitz or blitz like bullet, okay? It happens, you get lucky. All right, so I'm looking at the rook. Bishop e7 defends the rook, okay? Bishop itself is defended by the queen, and right now I'm up a pawn. Okay, it's basically the f-pawn, right? So simply drop the queen back. I can't put the queen anywhere on here or anywhere on here. And now my opponent has two attackers on this knight, and I would definitely be tempted to capture here because it forces pawn to recapture and open up the g-file towards the king. But for some reason he decides not to do that. For some reason, because he's playing like lightning, he's still got 9 minutes left on his clock, and we're getting towards the end game. He decides to develop his knight and block his bishop. Okay. Now, I think another move here would have been d5. That's definitely an idea. I'm attacking the knight. I'm also attacking this twice. If d5, but then if pawn takes queen, knight can recapture. So I've just lost my pawn. So knight d2 there. Rook comes out attacking this pawn. It's defended twice. Knight comes in now attacking his knight. Knight dodges out the way, and what did he miss? Right? He's an 8 minutes 48. The dude has used 1 minute 12 seconds. Right? He's got 10 minutes. I mean, this really should be in the checklist, but it's not a move by move thing. Use your damn time. If you're going to play 10-minute chess, use 10 minutes. Don't use 2 minutes. Dumbass. Okay, so he comes here, knight g6, forks queen and rook. Okay, now he comes in with the knight. 8 minutes 34. Dude has used 1 minute 25 of 10 minutes. Okay, now this is very important. He's thinking, oh no, my queen, and then he's thinking, oh no, but your queen, and I'm like, oh no, but my capture comes with check. Right? If your capture comes with check, check must be resolved. Either the knight can be captured, which he can't, or the king must move. That's it. Right? And my opponent resigns, because he knows that when his king moves, my queen just dodges out the way. So his king goes here, I come here, check, fork, whatever. King goes in the corner, I've got this, forking king and rook. It's game over. He blew it. He blew it in less than 1.5 minutes. Yes, that definitely deserves a dumbass award. All right, next one. I'm 1500, my opponent's 1400 odd, Scandinavian, and pushes. Now the correct move here is actually c5. I don't play that, I play my bishop out to f5, and they play d4, and always be aware of this, right? What are we in now? This is not We're not in Scandinavia anymore, Toto, right? We're now in France. This is actually a French advanced variation, but with a subtle improvement that the awful French bishop is free. It's out. Yeah, we have a French advance with the light squared bishop, which is normally trapped here, trying to find gainful employment, is out in the board. Great position. Okay, c5. Right, I know what to do. I switch into French mode. Okay, c5. If pawn takes here, thank you very much. I'll develop another bishop. Knight comes out. I take in the middle of the board, right? Capturing with a wing pawn and capturing a central pawn. Knight recaptures. Okay, drop the bishop back. Happy days. This bishop is in a very good. It's like, I can't believe I'm out in the board. I can play a part in this game, you know? All right, now, bishop comes out. He proposes a trade of bishops. I am uninterested. Knight c6. If you want to take my knight, right? Your knight, by the way, is undefended since this bishop blocked the queen's defense, okay? So what you're going to do, you're either going to, you can't go there. You can go there, you can go here, you can go here, you can go here, right? Or you can trade off, but if you trade off, I get to capture towards the middle. So he trades bishops, which is interesting. I recapture towards the center of the board. Now he trades knights. I recapture towards the center of the board. I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pawns on these 5 files, and he has 4, okay? He's got an extra pawn here and here because mine have moved inwards. Aha. So he castles, which is a bit odd, seeing as he's got 0 development, and I also have a semi-open H file. Okay, now, bishop out to c5. Why not? It's lined up against the king. This pawn is pinned. Okay. Dubious, because bishop now takes and pawn takes. So now, he's got doubled and isolated pawns on the e file, right? He does, however, he may have some action on the f file. So let's see how it pans out. c4 now, just solidifying my control of the center. And I'm thinking probably at this point, I'm not going to castle, right? I might want to get my king, say here, I don't know, king here, knight here, something like that. Release my rooks and start doing some damage down this H file. Okay, we have queen out. Now, you have to say, if my opponent's going to beat me, what's he going to do? Well, he could checkmate me on f7. So something must be done. Knight h6 is the move that I found. Okay, knight defends f7 now, but the knight can also come in here and block the queen's passage. Right? And so, he brings out his knight, I bring out my knight to f5. And now, if he tries to push that pawn, I just take it off. I'm not concerned, okay? Pushes a pawn, okay? And I counter strike. And this is very important. Like we saw in the previous game, my opponent tried a counterattack, but the counterattack didn't work. It didn't just calculate out in time. He didn't have time to take my queen, right? Now, if he takes my knight here, it's checkmate. So he can't do that. He's got to respond. Rook comes out here now. And now the queen simply drops back. What's the queen doing? Pinning this pawn. Now the pawn can't take the knight again, because it's illegal, because the king would be in check. You can't do it. So another rook comes across. Now I move my king up, because I want to bring maybe this rook across to defend the f-pawn. Or double up these pawns, these rooks somehow on the h-file. All good. Rook comes across now, breaking the pin on the pawn. So now the pawn can take the knight, and it comes with a discovery against the queen. Right? Not happy. So, knight back to h4. So the rook's moved off the f-file. So this is no longer an option. Okay? But my opponent has a mind fart. Queen takes f7. Is he thinking that he still had a rook here or here? I don't know. King takes, rook there, and you know, I thought for 4.1 seconds, and I couldn't see anything. He had nothing, right? And I'm looking at his other rook. There, rook here, and then he resigns. Okay? Again, 7 minutes 19 on the clock. I've got 4 minutes 56. Okay, you've got to use your time. All right. Last game. Bandish Bandit from the US of A against yours truly. Quick one for the road. Okay, we have d4. And at the moment I'm playing this. This is, the computer calls this the Indian game, but in fact I'm trying to play the Budapest if he plays c4. But we don't have that, we have London style, okay? So d5. Now in fact I'd forgotten my prep because I've been playing, or I'm planning to play the c5 immediate reaction against the London, which is a bit like, you know, like the Sicilian wing gambit almost, isn't it? You know, trying to deflect the central pawns from the control of the centre, giving up a pawn so that you can control the centre. So anyway, so he ploughs on with his London ideas, and now c5, very typical, and c3, boring, 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 bishop f5, queen out, attacking here. Okay. So the pawn is undefended. Now, queen here. So, and this is common in the London and sometimes in the French. You know, queen b3, queen b6, facing off. Nobody really wants to take because the pawn gets to capture inwards, and it opens up the rooks. Okay, so it's a bit of a face-off. We have pawn takes here. So I take his queen, he takes my queen, I develop my knight. Okay, now I'm a pawn down. He pushes the pawn forwards, but look, he's got two sets of double pawns here, right? I push e5, right? This is a good move. I'm hitting the bishop, so it comes with tempo. I have a lead in development in compensation for my pawn, right? And this is gaining me another tempo, okay? So my opponent has a bad structure. He's got a bishop under attack, and he's only got one piece developed. So bishop must retreat, and now knight comes in to e4, right? I'm now attacking his bishop one more time, right? And I've grabbed the center, so you know I really do feel like I've got good compensation here for my pawn. So he attacks my knight, and also the bishop behind it, right? And now knight takes g3. I'm attacking his bishop. And this is a common pattern, right? You just need to be aware of. When there's a piece behind the knight can capture and defend that piece on one of these two squares. It's the triangular defense, right? Now, if he takes my bishop, I can recapture. But wait. I'm also attacking his rook. So he figures that out, but he's only looking at part of the board, right? He's not looking, he hasn't done list every change, right? Step 4 on the current checklist. What just changed on the board? List every change. Now with this move, oh, he's just taken my bishop. Right, now this bishop's hanging, but so is the rook. It was just bad play, right? Again, he's only used a minute of his clock, right? And we're in the middle game, kind of. He moves his bishop back here, I just grab the rook. Why not, right? It's a rook for free. If I'd taken the bishop, king or knight recaptures, and that's kind of equal. I'd be up 3 or 2. Here I'm up 5, he resigns. Simple as, okay? So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is your opponent may be a dumbass, right? Everyone's a dumbass. We can all be a dumbass from time to time. Hang on in there. But more than anything else, on every move, just look at the whole mother flipping board, right? And say, okay, what changed? You know, where is the danger? Did my opponent just do something completely dumb? Because sometimes they will, and you need to be ready to capitalize on that. And don't be the guy who does the dumb moves. Okay, there you go. That is today's lesson. It's a nice quiet week. I'm gonna go out with the dogs shortly. Go out for a walk around the woods with my wife. Going to pick up our kind of pagoda thing that we're going to do Boxing Day, which is the 26th. Going to do that outside. Get my kids over. Get some family over. Going to have a barbecue outside. Should be fun. I'll try and make sure we keep some videos coming this week. I hope you're enjoying your week as well. Thanks for watching. See you soon.